to school, back to Bled. Here we are another year, and here we are to discuss once again an extremely important topic. Enlargement, the Bled Pledge. Where are we on that Bled Pledge a couple of years since it was announced? Now, as we all know, enlargement up until Russia's large-scale invasion of Ukraine was kind of almost dead in the water. Russia's invasion revived, in many respects, enlargement, and it revived enlargement for the very simple reason that enlargement was no longer viewed as being optional. It was no longer viewed as being a nice but not a necessary to have. There was no stable grey zone in between the European Union and what lied to the east, and therefore all of a sudden enlargement once again was understood as being strategic, as being in our own interests, as being perhaps even existential. And it is really in this context that the Bled Pledge was made. Now, I think in fairness what we can say a couple of years on is that a number of very important things have happened. New countries have been recognized as candidates to enlargement. Accession negotiations have been opened with several others. Accession talks have been accelerated with a couple represented here on stage today. And as President Costa was reminding us, we also have a growth plan. So I think, you know, if we really do want to look at the glass half full, it's fair to say that indeed there have been important steps being made. But for true believers in enlargement, for enlargement enthusiasts, I think as many of us in this room are, we tend to look often also at the glass being half empty. What is it that we could do more? What is it that we can do to accelerate further? What is it that we can actually do to ensure that that Bled Pledge is not only met, but perhaps we can even anticipate it by a couple of years? And in order to discuss this question, Ali has already introduced them. We have an absolutely stellar panel to discuss them with us, and especially indeed for those that would like to see the process accelerating even further, there are, I think, at least a couple of questions or challenges that I think would be extremely important to discuss over the next hour or so. The first is what I would define as being the poison in the enlargement process. And the poison in the enlargement process is the bilateralization and the politicization of the enlargement process. The way in which member states, some member states, have, and this is not an entirely new phenomenon, but it's certainly a phenomenon that has become graver over time, have hijacked the enlargement process for reasons that have very little to do with the EU's own interests and values. So that's, in a sense, one challenge that I'd like to put on the table. And then, of course, there is another broader challenge, which is the fact that, particularly I think if we think back, a year ago, many of us thought and really believed that with this new political institutional cycle that began, enlargement would be the priority. It would really be up there in terms of what is it that the EU set out to achieve. And whereas, of course, it is a priority, the last year has inevitably perhaps seen a number of other important issues on the table. Defence, obviously, being one, the broader question of competitiveness, as President Costa was reminding us, obviously the trade issue and the tariff war with the United States. And so here we are in a situation in which glass half full, a lot has been achieved. Glass half empty, a lot more can and should be achieved. And so perhaps to kick us off with the discussion, Commissioner Kos, let me begin with you. You're also obviously a real believer in enlargement, and not only are you a believer in enlargement, but you're putting a hell of a lot of energy into actually making the Bled Pledge a reality. So let me perhaps begin by asking you, what is it that you can actually do, or we can actually collectively do, to make sure that enlargement is actually bumped up that list of priorities facing the European Union?
Yes, indeed. I see the enlargement process as much more than making our European Union bigger in the number of square kilometers or in the number of people. For me, enlargement today is really what we have heard from the Slovenian president before. It is also a kind of unification, unification of Europe, which we haven't had before in our history. And what can we do? You know, it will be soon that I will be 1 year commissioner, and 2-3 more very much important points. First, the red line, what I see in my work, also working with the candidate countries, is the importance of leadership. It cannot be, the accession process cannot be successful if it's not led by the leaders, like we have Milojko and Edi today, who first believe themselves that the best for their country is the EU membership. They live this, they show this. And of course, for this we need leaders who are able to put reforms over day-to-day businesses, who know how to resolve the bilateral issues. You've been speaking about this, Antonio also. And third, who also understand, I call this the soft point, that it's their task to bring the people of their country to this so-called soft point when everybody will understand, indeed, it is moving and we are doing it and we are making it. The accession process is not only about what we do in Brussels or what the leaders do. It is about how public is supporting it, the parliament is supporting it, and civil society. First point. The second point is there are no shortcuts. You've been speaking about the pledge of Mr. Borrell. He was speaking about that 2 sides should be ready in 2030. The candidate countries, but also we. But in order that we will be able to accept the new member states, they have to deliver. So no shortcuts, meaning the rule of law, human rights, anti-corruption, free media are non-negotiable. So all this has to be fulfilled. The third important thing I would name is the geopolitics has changed. We are now confronted with the fact that they are, I call them, external disruptive forces who would like to see us fail. If I very simplify, in the past it has been, if a candidate country has fulfilled the criteria, it could enter. Now we have external forces who would like to see us, Europe, fail, and candidates too. We saw what happened in Georgia. We have a very important elections at the end of September in Moldova, where we see that Russia is really fighting against the present government who has chosen, and the people who has chosen the European path.
Thank you so much, Marta, for this. And indeed, let me now turn to the candidate countries. And as I was hinting at earlier, both Albania and Montenegro, in fact, do represent, I think at this point in time, really the frontrunners in this process. And I think, really the countries that if we are to meet the Bled Pledge and do better, they are the ones that seem to be really quite well on the way. So, Eddie, perhaps let me begin with you and perhaps turn to you, paraphrasing what Marta was saying. What is it that you are doing to actually put reforms above the day-to-day politics? And, what is it that you can tell us today to persuade us that Albania actually is on track, not for 2030, but as you yourself said, for 2027? Persuade us that this is indeed what is happening and how Albania is actually going to meet that pledge.
Thank you. And first of all, it's really very nice to be here in the 20th anniversary of this forum, although I have not followed the whole 20. And I want to make very quick remarks, 2 remarks. Number one, I saw the film and I was amazed to see our former president being the same. Like Slovenia, by the way, every time I come here, nothing changes. It's the same. Perfect. Perfect. And the second remark is, I don't know for what reason, maybe it's strategic, but the chairs become tinier and tinier and tinier. More and more uncomfortable. Maybe you have a message through the chairs, I don't know. This panel only. Just to tell us, don't.
There's a reason.
Just to give, just to tell us we have to finish quick. But if we wanted, you wanted us to finish quick. First of all, no Italian moderator, because they become the main player. And second, no Balkan people, you know, and no candidates, which are even more frustrating. So no, I think it's not that we are saying that we are ready for 2027, but it's that thanks to a Slovenian record breaker in swimming, we have a very clear objective put on our table by the Commission, challenging us to deliver on all benchmarks and on all criteria, and to end the negotiations until 2027. And then, of course, it will be the member states, and it's another part of the process. So what we are doing is exactly that. We are pushing and pushing and pushing and not asking questions, because the best thing to do with the European Union is to be free when you talk in Bled, but to say yes, 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 yes every time they say to you, you have to do this, you have to do this.
Not negotiations.
So if you mix Bled with Brussels, then you are F. So if you don't want to be effed, you have to do in Bled the sharing of the vision and different opinions and everything you want to express, and then go to Brussels and simply be a very, very diligent student. But this being said, I want to say that there is no rush because I believe that the most important part, for us at least, Albania, Montenegro is a big country, I'm talking about Albania, it's to use the process of the accession as a process of state building, because Europe is a bless for a country like us, because it's the only place where you can get the knowledge of how to build institutions. We never had institutions before in the real sense, and to build institutions is the most difficult exercise. And this is what makes the difference between Afghanistan, Iraq, or name it, where our very dear friends from the other side of the ocean have thought that with bombs and with values you can change the country, but it's not the case. What we have in Europe, although we got out of a history that was similar, very similar, Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever, in terms of lack of freedom, in terms of all brutalities, is the know-how of institution buildings. And so for this, I tell to everyone back home, we have to be diligent and to do the work. It's not something we necessarily like, you know. We don't necessarily like to have the traffic as perfect as in Germany. But we have to do it. And Europe is here to learn us, to teach us how to have traffic lights and how to have good circulation within the institutional life. It's something amazing, and we are progressing. But beyond the leadership, I must say, in our case, the Albanian people. We are far from the second in terms of being Euro-optimistic, because we love Europe unconditionally, and although Europe has made us suffer a lot, we have the full conviction that we are going to marry one day. So finally they have cut some of the bullshit, which took for many years saying, we love you, but we are not ready to talk to you. We love you, but now they are talking. So there is a step further, as Marta says, I say is marriage-based, she says is merit-based, so we need to deserve the marriage, and we are working for it.
Thank you, Eddie. And Milojko, let me turn to you on this. Tell us about your true love for the European Union. Tell us about what you are doing to persuade this at times rather difficult entity, animal, to indeed engage in marriage. And tell us what you're doing on, again, coming back to Marta's point, on putting reforms above the domestic fray of politics, and perhaps above all, what more could you do?
Well, first of all, yes, Montenegro, it is a small country in many ways, but it's one way, it's a very big one. And I thank Eddie for mentioning that, because I think Montenegro is the most ethnically diversified country in Europe, by far. We don't have ethnic majority. The only country in Europe that doesn't have ethnic majority. So everything has to be built by the compromise. And you need, and by the inclusive approach that includes everybody. And when I say everybody, it's not like Finnish, Norwegians and Danes. It's Montenegrins, Serbs, Albanians, Croats, Bosniaks, and other folks from the Balkans. The usual suspects that created instability for decades before, etc., etc. So you can imagine the amount of challenge that we are facing, obviously, in Montenegro, but winning this quote-unquote war in Montenegro, it's basically, it's a small EU in a nutshell. It's a small Balkans in a nutshell. If we do this by values, and the way we are going to build a consensus is around European Union, obviously, accession, that's number one. Number two, it's about the economy. And number three is about the rule of law, treating everybody fairly and squarely, regardless of their ethnic background. And, you know, this is what is really important, and I think we managed to do it to the big extent, obviously. In Montenegro now, within the majority, we have all the parliamentary Albanian, Serb, and Bosniak parties, that are obviously Montenegrins as well, but I'm saying those from the region, which was unthinkable before. Now we have them all in the government, in the majority, deciding together. And we
you
just had
only the Germans to be an EU,
and Italians,
a German minority there.
So the thing is, we had a big reform just recently, and we had whole parliament voting unisonly on electoral reform, which was a really big one. It was impossible to do it for like decades. The same was about the Constitutional Court and many other reforms that we couldn't really do for decades. Now we can do all of these things with more than 2/3 of the majority voting in favor, because of these three things. And this is what unifies the country. And this is what should unify us all in European Union as well. I lived more than a decade in Asia, in Singapore, Japan, China. I've been to India many times. I've been to Indonesia many times. And you know, okay, yes, Montenegro is ethnically diverse, but looking from that perspective, all of our differences, they are ridiculous. You know, in Montenegro you have Bosniak, Serbian, Croatian, and Montenegrin language, you know, which is basically completely interchangeable. We can understand each other completely. We basically eat the same food. Our culture is almost the same, or it is the same. You know, the differences are tiny. And we make them so big because we focus on the past and we don't focus on the future.
Right.
It's about time we just focus on the future. Or we're going to be, we're going to be insignificant. We are becoming insignificant, but we are going to be even more insignificant if we don't focus on the future, if we don't focus on what's ahead of us, because Asia is focused. Very, very focused. Next 3-4 years are going to be monumental in terms of the change, the amount of change, the exponential change that's coming in the next 3 or 4 years in AI, in other big technologies. It's going to be monumental. We cannot miss this opportunity. So, yes, Europe is unified in our diversity. Great. Now let's move on and let's focus on the future. And we have to focus on some of the things that very smart people like Mario Draghi already made it for us. Let's remove the internal barriers. We're talking about, tariff barriers with the US. How about we focus on our own internal barriers? They're like huge. Right. They're really preventing us from being really a single market. And I'm talking as somebody who is not even part of the single market. Yet. But we are becoming slowly, like SEPA now and some other folks. So innovation, investing in innovation, making a good regulatory environment for innovation. Like 2 of our countries, we are small countries. We can be test beds for innovation. Together with the European Commission, we can sit down and say, hey, if it works out in Albania, if it works out in Montenegro, let's scale it up and let's become a European standard. These are the things, and actually that's good because 2 of our countries, we don't have vested interests of big industry folks. We can easily move ahead in terms of innovation, in terms of regulatory change. And our administrations and systems are relatively new, and we can actually adapt much faster. And if this approach works well at the time we join EU, how about we make it Europe-wide? And this is could be potential contribution to the European Union. Because you shouldn't be only receiving end. We should also be on the giving end.
Absolutely. And let me now jump on to member states. The prime ministers of which we have 2 at this panel, Croatia and, of course, our host, Slovenia. And let me turn to you, perhaps, Andrej, first. Ask you, I want to come back to this poison question. And, as Eddie was saying, yes, indeed, inevitably, member states are fundamental. They're there at the beginning of the process, and, of course, they have to be there at the end of the process. But perhaps they're a little bit too much in the way in the middle of the process, right? And that's where a lot of this, I think, poison and bilateralization comes from. Now, both Croatia and, of course, Slovenia, big supporters of enlargement. What is it that your countries could do to make that support, to make that friendship, to make enlargement happen, actually more forceful, more powerful indeed in ensuring that that poison is somehow sucked away from the process?
First of all, thank you once again for the invitation for being here at Bled 20th edition. Thank you, Robert, Madam President, Minister. It's a great pleasure, Commissioner, to be here, I think, 6th time in a row at this opening panel. A few points on enlargement, and then I'll come. As someone who has been who is coming from the country that was vaccinated with the poison that you have mentioned. My first point, enlargement has really gone through a revival since Russia's aggression against Ukraine. I think we need to take that truly into account. This is my most important point today for all of us. Second, Juncker said in 2014, no enlargement. Ursula didn't have time in the first mandate. This time, your mission letter looks more optimistic. In last 18 years, only Croatia joined. These are the facts which are sort of sobering in terms of the topic and the priority of the enlargement. Is it really a priority among the European Council members? I'm not so sure. We had a first debate on the European Council level conclusions when I just joined, which was a long time ago, 8 years ago, after I don't know how many years, which means that the heads of the European Union in terms of political leadership were not dealing adequately with the issue. We jointly revived it as of 2018, which is very good. Now it's a common practice to meet the leaders of the Western Balkans region, which was void from 2003 till 2018. These are the facts. But the main point about the enlargement is, of course, the preparation of the candidate countries, the political momentum, that the critical mass of support exists, but the real issue is the decision-making process and the budget. These are the two unspoken critical elements, whether the big countries will allow more smaller states with very modest contribution to the EU budget being allowed to decide when they believe that someone else should have an upper hand, because we all know that the 10 richest member states are financing 80% of the budget. These are the facts. It takes a while until people realize how things really happen, but that's how they happen. And that's why I think the candidate countries should really take a good look at what Germany and France are saying about the decision-making process. These are the consequences of the top jobs game back in 2019. I think it has the biggest and the deepest consequence to the decision-making process of the EU. And I see that not many people are understanding this, but this is the gist of the problem. When it comes to the bilateral issues, well, I'm in Slovenia, I'll be very polite, let's say history is history, but putting bilateral issues into the accession process is not very healthy for the accession process. I will just say that we have a current situation with North Macedonia, which is very visible. For those of you who are younger, North Macedonia was more advanced than Croatia when we had the Zagreb summit in 2000. They initialed the association, the stabilization and association agreement on the 24th of November 2000. I was there, so I remember that. And it's been 25 years. They haven't started properly the accession process, and we've been a member for more than 12 years. So a lot of things are ethically unacceptable, but they happen. And I think we should find a common strategy how to avoid this. I think there is a lot of maturity among most of the member states to not to do that, especially the whole QMB concept is being introduced, whether it's for enlargement, whether it's for foreign policy. And then again, you look at the smaller countries. If the QMB is installed, and since not everybody is behaving in the spirit that Antonio mentioned, and we know it, he is now the new master of 27-1 and the chairman's conclusions and all of the diplomatic nuances that we adopt, but that's the way it is. I have the feeling that many countries will never allow the consensus go away, because literally they become overnight irrelevant in terms of decision-making process, and that's why this sort of scholarly or theoretical narratives, they just hit the hard reality when it comes to the statement's craft and what one should do and what one can do. So I think we should continue with the healthy and impulses that Marta is saying, and help our friends to do the reforms. Unless both conditions are met, that the criteria are really fulfilled and the political momentum is created, there will be no enlargement. Very clear. We know it, and avoid all the poisonous elements as much as possible. Yep. If we behave in a poisonous manner, some countries will never join the European Union, and we are not behaving like that, on the record.
Absolutely. Robert, let me turn to you now, and I think picking up some of the remarks that Andre was making there, and if I could sort of sum it up, you basically have a situation in which there is, at times, a very small but very active and vocal minority that stands against. And in general, there is a very large majority that is in favour. But that large majority at times, and this is me adding to this, is at times relatively silent. I mean, at times, indeed, enlargement is not as much as a priority as we would like it to be. So the question really to me is not so much what is it that can be done to persuade that very small and vocal minority, but what is it that can be done to make that majority in favour actually make that majority less of an abstract majority and more of an active majority? So what is it that you think member states, including your own, could do?
Okay, first, a big hello from myself as well to all the guests and the public. Many things have already been said, and what Andrei was explaining is how things work behind the scene at the European level. But I believe you're quite right when you say that majority of member states are, I would call them more or less not interested, or
neutral.
Not interested, because it's a nuisance to them to deal with it.
Right.
So that having been said, there is only one path forward. For the candidates, being as proactive as possible, taking both Milojko's and Edi's stance, saying, okay, this is something that we need to do because it's good for our country, it's good for the institution building, it's good for economy, it's good for our self-esteem, whatever. And on the other hand, a lot of proactive moves and steps by commissioners, especially by Marta, in order to make the European, first Commission, but then also European Council, realize that we need to implement some changes. And we need to do them before 27, meaning we don't have much time to start implementing those measures. And it seems, at the first glance, it seems rather straightforward. As what Marta was saying, or maybe Andrei, I'm not remember, okay, there is a political decision at the beginning, and there is obviously a political decision at the end of the negotiations, but in between it should be a meritocracy ruling and the technical process. It doesn't work that way right now. But I don't see any real reason why we cannot revert to this.
Right.
And this is something that will take some convincing, some very hard work by Antonio as well, in order to being possible to implement these decisions. But we've done it in other cases. 26 or 27 minus 1 formula worked in other cases, so it might work in this case as well. So it's doable, but Marta will have to find not just against the wind of poisoners, but also against the wind of ignorance by many others who are not really willing to go into the changes of the decision-making process. But still, it's doable, and Marta is, I know, she really lives for this work. She's doing, and she lives for results as well. So I think the enlargement process is in very good hands. The other good thing is that even though it comes from not so happy circumstances, is that after the Russian aggression on Ukraine, even though in war, they are really implementing all these institutional changes really fast. So they are not giving European Commission any excuse when they ask for speeding up the accession process. And it's going to be real hard to say no to people in war if and when they really fulfill all the conditions.
Yeah.
And this is the window for the Western Balkans. We spoke about it 2 years ago with Charles Michel here, that the window has been opened. So it's really more or less now or never, because afterward, I really believe in 5 years it's going to be closed again. And there is another major change, and not that we are introducing it here, but we are just pinpointing it right now. In the past, mostly it was all the Western Balkans at once, because there are some big countries that we shall never leave behind. Okay, that was the narrative of the past. I truly believe that the big countries will follow only when they see small countries succeed. Unless we let those who have the merits succeed, the big countries will not change at all. So that's why we decided that for this
Montenegro
forum...
is the biggest country and is changing all the time.
That has already been ascertained.
That has been cleared already. Who is the biggest? Yeah.
How many ethnicities they have? They are huge.
So I believe they could be an inspiration to everyone else to follow suit. Yeah, I believe they're in good hands, and looking forward for 2 years from now to announce the results. That
we are putting pressure on them. Thank you, Robert, for this, and Andrei, because really, the glass for me is not half, it's nearly full, because it is a priority. Perhaps we do not show everything to the outside world, but we are working really much quicker, even if we sometimes cannot move in the Council. Antonio, from the technical part, we are moving. In the last 8 months, we have opened more clusters than in the last 5 years, and closed more chapters than in the last 10 years. We will open 2 clusters more for Albania this year, so we already agreed with Eddie that we will celebrate. First in Brussels, and then next year with a football match between candidate countries and member states in Tirana, and the president of UEFA will play with us, and perhaps some others too. Then, of course, with Montenegro, and now with your help, thank you for this, Andrei, we are advancing, and it is possible, if we finish in 2026 with the technical part of the negotiations, then in 2028 we could get the 28th member of the EU. If Eddie will do it as he is doing now excellently in 2029, we could have the 29th new member of the EU, and then it's shortly 30, but then my mandate is at the end. So I don't have enough time anymore, just 4 years more. So I have to hurry up. But may I, if I just add, I was speaking about the leadership and how is this really, for me, yes, I am goal-oriented. That's why we made an Eurobarometer on enlargement. Tomorrow we will publish all the results. The citizens of Albania support the EU membership by 92%.
We are loyal people, We supported the Ottoman Empire by 92%. We supported the Soviet Union by 92%. We supported Maoist China by 92%, and now EU. And our best is that even when they fail, we are with them until someone else comes. So when you will fail, we'll say no. We are EU. Full stop.
Eddie,
like the Japanese soldier in the forest.
When you told me a few months back that more than 90% are supporting, I thought, gosh, you're going back to the communist times. But now we have the proof, and it is nearly 70% in Montenegro. What I want to say, if people do not believe and the leaders do not speak about how important this is and what it has to be done, you cannot get that much support for the EU membership. And you got it in Croatia, we got it in Slovenia. And from this aspect, really, it's not about the benchmarks. I agree, Antonio, with you and with the clusters and chapters. It is really about the leadership on both sides.
But hang on a sec.
I don't hang on because I am here to speak. You are here to moderate.
Yeah, I have to moderate you.
Moderate, okay. No, I just wanted to add something, but moderate.
Okay, I'll moderate you and give you the word in a moment. In fact, I wanted to ask...
I'm indulging just because we were your vassals once upon a time.
There you go. That's why. That's the real reason they chose me. But I wanted to ask Andrei, and in fact you, Eddie, because your remarks, although they were not intended to do so, but they sparked a thought in my head. And that thought in my head is that as we meet here in Bled, others are meeting in China. And there is a different order, if you like, in the making, right? And there's a love fest going on as we speak between Putin and Xi and Modi and several other mostly rather unsavory characters. And so it's not as if this conversation is happening in a vacuum. I mean, it's not as if we will have forever. That window will be closing, and it risks closing even sooner than 4 years unless we actually do speed up. And so, Andrei, I wanted to kind of perhaps come to you and ask you to reflect and kind of put this discussion within that broader geopolitical context? And also, what is it that can be done in order to send the message to our own populations, be it in member states or be it, Eddie, in candidate countries, in American candidate countries, that actually this is a region that can add to the security of Europe?
I fully agree with you that the world that we were living in a couple of years ago has so rapidly changed, and I would say irretrievably changed. This is the key new element when you look at the NATO Hague Summit decision commitment to 5% by 2035. Would have been unthought of a couple of years ago because everything was settled. We were sort of gliding towards the welfare state, and then there was a wake-up call in 2013-14, and then 2022 with Putin basically showing his cards and even showing them again after Alaska and after Washington. I think we need to be realistic. The attacks are going on Ukraine, and nothing has moved an inch towards some sort of concept of pursuing peace, so as to be very precise. The new alliances which are being forged by the biggest, largest, most numerous and economically very influential powers, not to mention nuclear powers, is critically important for the West. I mean, we are still in the phase after the United States presidential elections, in the phase of consolidating the transatlantic relationship, which is bumpy. Bumpy in security, bumpy in defense, bumpy in terms of multilateralism, bumpy in terms of respecting the international law, and bumpy in terms of trade relations, especially with the tariffs that are on the agenda. So the West, since we are old, the West needs a consolidation. The slower the enlargement, the more influential other actors will become in all of the countries of the Western Balkans. We are all being polite, but when you look at the harsh political reality, you have North Macedonia blocked, you have Serbia under more than 2 years of biggest and strongest and the most serious internal unrests and demonstrations at the verge of the civil war. Bosnia and Herzegovina with Dodik overstretching for years whether he will separate or not, hop, he's out. This is where we are today with Banjska that left without a serious remark or articulation back in 23 by anybody in the European Union. We pretended it didn't happen. These are the realities of where we are. So I think we should be really sober about the enlargement and the changing global context. I'm very much in favor of the enlargement. I think all the countries are doing a fair share of effort to join, but they need to stabilize politically. The numbers of political support are not enough. We also had big support before we joined. If I went now to a referendum, 50-50. 50-50. The narratives have changed. There are so many false information that is being spread around, and people, unfortunately, in the context of the technological revolution, tend to trust false information quite a bit. So it's a perennial battle for us to win the narratives, and we should also be realistic. This is part of the enlargement. The other are Ukraine and Moldova, both under active or frozen conflicts, both under war or occupation of part of their territory. This is where we are. These are the two closest to Cyprus situation that we have had, except that the ongoing Russian aggression is still there. So the topic is important, but it's so strained with all of these elements that we have to be realistic. One thing we have learned through our enlargement is we need to be very realistic.
Eddie.
Very realistic.
Oh, sorry, it's stronger than me now because he mentioned Alaska. And as I am haunted by something I told here about Putin and the time zones, it got in my mind something new about Putin's waste biological bag. You know about it, right? That wherever he goes, he has a waste biological bag to collect and bring home. And the reason why is because he collects proof that wherever he lands was historically Russia. Understand? So I want to go back 1 second to the joke, to the half joke and half-truth about our 92% historically, because it's true, but in the same time, it was never our choice. So we were fully in with all empires, and the first empire that we have embraced because of our choice is European Union. And we are very devoted to it. And by the way, I don't think there is another country so far in Europe where you can have a campaign and you can run an election exactly on that, on the EU. And the reason why we won big this time, I think, was very much connected to the EU pledge and to the call for all the people to gather around the flag and bring the flag in EU. Now, I was before in another room and in another talk, and someone from Slovenia said to me, "You are doing great, but be careful for what you wish, because we are in EU and it's not going well for us." And I told them, listen, you are in such a good place in Slovenia that if we go through the list of things you have and we would wish to have, it's huge.
Are you absolutely sure?
But there is one thing in the list where we beat you, which is optimism. You are quite depressed here, you know? And, you know, because it's so perfect, it's so beautiful, and you are really scared that who touches something will do something wrong, you know? While in Albania, there are so many things we need to continue to improve and to adjust, that is just the drive. And secondly, to your question about what happened in China, here comes the part that has nothing to do with our negotiations, but has to do with me as a European, free European. I believe that Europe should have been there. So I believe that Europe should be everywhere where the world meets. And Europe should give up on Europe. It's not just Europe, it was the whole collective West until a while, since the change happened in America, but should give up on trying to impose to the others its own way of living. What we need to do is to protect our way of living from the others, but not to select friends and to select whomever we want to talk with based on their ways of living. So it's because yes, and by the way, I represent a country that fully stands with Ukraine, and the only country, I believe, in Europe that since the fall of the Berlin Wall never had a visit to Russia or never had a guest from Russia. So nobody can say that I have any kind of confusion in my mind, but I believe that Europe should not wait from the other side of the ocean what's next with the peace plan. Europe is first and foremost peace, is culture of peace, is peace and culture. So, of course, we have to defend ourselves. Of course, we have to improve our defense. Of course, we should not rely on others. But how comes that we don't have yet a plan? And what we wait? You know, we wait for what? For the next move. So, Viktor Orban, you know, is a very controversial figure, good friend. I appreciate a lot Antonio. I appreciate a lot Victor. I appreciate a lot this gentleman here. And I don't base my appreciation on how much I agree or don't agree with someone, but how deep the conversation goes. And when he mentioned ceasefire some time ago, he was treated like a pest. He was treated like the waste biological bag, And when suddenly someone else on the other side of the ocean mentions ceasefire, suddenly Europe discovers that there is also ceasefire. But it's too late. It's too late. Nobody is going to fall for it. Now what we are waiting? We are waiting that someone else finds something else, and then we find ourselves in front of a fait accompli, and we become isolated even more from others. And to conclude, a very dear friend of all of us, I believe, from another country out of Europe, in the Middle East, asked me, have you counted how many friends you had before the war and how many you have since the war? And this is a question that we have to make, because we don't have any reason to not be proactive with all the forces that are out there, and to not have our own, like Antonio said, very rightly so, our own deals, our own communication. And when it comes to the enlargement, it's not really what enlargement is to get Montenegro in. Even if Albania gets Montenegro in, it's not enlarged. It's practically from very small to too small. So what enlargement is to get Albania in? What enlargement? Enlargement. What enlargement? We both are like, I don't know.
Our houses.
So...
get on with it.
But
the message.
But if EU enlarges with us, it gets stronger. It gets more compact. Why? Because it doesn't leave a part of the body open for viruses, for microbes, for assaults, for infections, and so on.
Exactly.
And this is the point. So if tomorrow things go in a different direction, this will be a wound open in the middle of Europe. While if we are in, we are simply, closing a space where from a very little space it can become a big problem. And we are the only reality in the history of geography, I believe, that I'm talking wrong like an Italian.
I have to prove you wrong,
so we are the only reality in the history of geography who have two borders. I mean, the European Union has two borders. One outside border, like everyone else, and one inside border. And within the inside border is me and him, Now, what enlargement? Close this, get rid of this inside border. Single market, we entering a single market will be China or Japan threatening Europe. Bring us in.
Thank you, Eddie.
And we bring some fun. We bring some fun, some optimism, some youth, some desire for life.
Okay, we got it.
Happy marriage, Prime Minister.
I'm on a mission here to prove that you are wrong, not in what you just said, but in the fact that I'm an Italian moderator in your Balkan panel. I'm on a mission to prove you wrong, right? And so,
prove me wrong.
As in, not on what you just said, but on the fact that we have to end on time. And so, let me end with
I can prove myself wrong all the time.
A final question to Milojko and to Robert, and it's a very short and crispy one. Tell me one thing, just one thing, which you could point to when we meet again in 1 year. Here we are in a situation in which it's not a 50-50, glass half full, half empty. Let's say it's a 2/3.
No, I don't accept 50-50. So make it 70-30.
Okay, 70-30. I want it to have an 80 or 85 next year. What is the one thing that should be done, can be done, and that you will do to make sure that we get to that 80-85% by next year? Milojko.
Sorry, 80-85% of what?
Of the glass being half full. Meeting the Bled.
An attack from Russia to Montenegro will do it.
And I want it in 30 seconds.
Then we have a third world war, as Trump once said. Actually, getting Montenegro into NATO was one of his concerns in his first mandate. I'm joking. So, but it's
Because he doesn't know the size of Montenegro. This is the problem.
No. He's probably very well aware of the size of Montenegro. But it's, I think the economy. Going back to the basics, guys, the economy is all, it's you know, how are we going to pay for defense? How are we going to pay for many other things? How are we going to keep the political support?
Why you don't even need defense? So, if you are all occupied, you are occupied.
No, hang on. We need a distinctly, I would say, different and better story on the economy by
connecting the economy and real life of the citizens with all the geostrategic approach that we need to do. Like we need the real, the people have to see the economy improving. This is the key.
Last word.
You want a realistic answer?
Yeah, but an optimistic, realistic answer.
Okay, the optimistic is they're going to close a record-breaking number of chapters in the next 12 months. You all and they mostly. And Antonio will find a way how to reshape the decision-making process in order to bring them to the final decision on whether they can get in or not. Unfortunately, realistically, it's going to take 2 years.
Okay, I can live with that. I can live with that. And being just, Eddie, 10 seconds late, I think that Ali will be back here to tell us what we have to do. Please join me in thanking this absolutely fantastic panel.
Thank you.
You see how much he misses me. Look.
I do miss you, Prime Minister.
Yeah,
it's always good to see you. Next year, perhaps we'll be back on stage together, Prime Ministers, Commissioners. First of all, thank you so much for a very thoughtful and very thought-provoking discussion. Hopefully, at the very latest, in 2 years of time, we'll have these two gentlemen here as full-fledged members of the European Union. Thank you, Nathalie, for your moderation, for finishing on time. Ladies and gentlemen, before I let our esteemed panelists go and leave those uncomfortable chairs, let me just point out very quickly before we take a quick break, please don't stray too far because we have another highlight for you, a one-on-one with EU High Representative Kaja Kallas, where perhaps many of the issues that you have laid forth will be picked up again. Prime Minister's Commissioner Nathalie, thank you so much